Here's the video with June. What do you remember from all those years?
Oh, my goodness. It was life. It was my life, and it was Roy's life. And I can't tell you what each one meant. There are just not enough words for me to express my appreciation and my love for each one of the ones that was there. And I really mean that very sincerely. And I wished I could talk more, but I always loved you and appreciated everyone there. And I thank God for every moment there. I told somebody the other day that when we knew that God had called us to the seminary as students, there wasn't another seminary. It was only Southern Seminary. And there was no other seminary except Southern Seminary. And I can't tell you how much Southern meant to Roy and me in the ministry. And it just meant everything to us. I wished I was a better speaker. Roy was a speaker in our family, but I loved each one of you, and Roy did too. And I'm 96 years old. I live in a home called the Masonic Home, and as most of you know, that Roy died. And I live here. I live close to Mary Ann, and she takes care of me. She has twins, and the twin girls are 25 years old today. They're twins. And we've always had such a good, happy time together. Marianne was married, and somebody killed her husband who worked at the bank, and they killed him about 6 months ago. Killed him and 4 others. I guess you read about it in the paper because it just went around the world. And his name was Tommy Elliott, and he took care of me, and he and Mary Ann took care of me.
Today, I'm hurt, and I'm hurting, and I know so many people out there are as well. We lost 4 children of God today, one of whom was one of my closest friends. Tommy Elliott helped me build my law career, helped me become governor, gave me advice on being a good dad. He's one of the people I talk to most in the world, and very rarely are we talking about my job. He was an incredible friend.
It was a sad thing in our family because we were so happy, but God has been with us and helped us through this. Yeah. Mary Ann has her doctor's degree, and just really teaches around the world because teaching has changed so much. I go to church here because I don't have to get Mary Ann to bring me to and from the church, but I'm very active here in the church. And it's a small church, but I do miss my church. But this way, I'm go to Bible study, and I do what I can for the Lord. If you're ever in this area, please come by and see me. Everybody in Broadway Baptist Church they visit me, and I'm blessed by Broadway Baptist Church. Knowing you all has meant very much to my life, and I thank God for every moment. May God bless you, and I'll always love each one of you.
Oh, beautiful.
And have very wonderful memories of you all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, here are some faces that I think you will remember from 1993.
The Southern Baptist Theological Seminary is a seminary of heritage and of hope. And this is our theme not only for this inauguration time, but for all the years of the 80s and the 90s. And I invite you to stand with me as a weaver as we grasp our heritage in one hand and our hope in the other, and weave together that tapestry which shall embody the unfolding purposes of God in the 1980s and in the 1990s.
Yours is not an easy task as the chief administrator of this great institution. You face an amazing challenge of opportunities, problems, relationships, satisfactions, and frustrations. And yet, there is something wonderful in being the chief executive officer of an organization which will help to shape our world today and continue as a force for good throughout eternity. William James expressed it well. The greatest use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast life.
We praise God for the Christian life, spiritual gifts, theological scholarship, effective leadership, and caring humanity of Roy Lee Honeycutt.
As a writer, a teacher, and a preacher far and wide, he set the image of a scholarly president.
Roy Honeycutt is one of the best examples of the kind of scholarship that Southern Seminary has been capable of producing that we've had. He did his graduate work here under Dr. Francisco, and has been able to carry forward both that interest and concern for Scripture as well as deep concern for knowledge in the hearts of ministerial students. His scholarship is reflected not only from the background at Southern, but also his European connections. He studied in Scotland and then later in Cambridge.
I think his scholarship especially manifests in his ability to integrate study with teaching and ministry. He has the ability to draw out from students. He has an evocative capacity to bring them into learning on their own.
Perhaps most Southern Baptists will have seen the results of this on his productions of Bible and Life, in which he brought his deep scholarship and knowledge to the very practical level of helping people understand their Sunday school lessons and the ways in which they could be taught on Sundays.
Let your presidency, thirdly, be reformed. Lead us forcefully in the search for new truth under the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
I'm grateful for Dr. Honeycutt's unflagging commitment to academic freedom. As one committed to graduate theological education, he values and well knows the importance of faith that seeks understanding. Hence, one has to have freedom of inquiry to do that. Even amidst the various aspects of the controversy, he has encouraged us to continue to do our work and has not violated the sanctity of the classroom, which I greatly appreciate.
We can't live on a memory. We've got to take our heritage and bind it up with our hope and be all that God would have us to be in the 1980s and the 1990s.
The vision of Layne Honeycutt is like an alpine dweller. He appreciates both those things that are in the village below with all of their charm, namely the details of everyday life, and the grandeur and majesty and challenge of the mountains.
I speak of his vision for lifelong learning opportunities for alumni and friends. And to fulfill that goal, he led us to establish 6 seminary centers: the Center for Family Life, for Evangelism and World Missions, for Preaching, for the study of the local church, for ethics. All of these are centers that continue to work well in planning programs and in engaging in research. We are glad for that opportunity for our alumni and friends. The third vision I mentioned is his commitment to lifelong learning in extended places off the campus. He wanted to extend MDiv work and DMin work and the extension of boys' centers everywhere. Today we have more MDiv studies and DMin studies off campus than ever before in our history.
Our charge to you, Dr. Honeycutt, is simple. First, be your own man. Each president in the past has been significant in his own way and not as an extension of his predecessor. I've had the good fortune of knowing the 3 presidents who led in this institution during the past 50 years. Each was markedly different from his predecessor, and yet the seminary has grown and prospered under their varied leadership.
Those who were a part of his administration received that communicated message. We want to be accessible to those who are working in this institution and to those who must provide the leadership in the institution. And I will always be grateful for that accessibility in the President's office and to the President as a person.
It was an open administration. There was a sense of well-being that he brought to us.
As president of Southern Seminary, be filled with the vision God has for all His creation and all His people. Stretch our minds as Southern Baptists to embrace the needs of different kinds of persons, to break down dividing walls of hostility. Lead us to care more intelligently and skillfully in Christian ministry, to span the chasm between clergy and laity, between male and female.
modesty prevents me from saying that Dr. Honeycutt's greatest contribution is adding Dr. Pamela Scalise and myself to the School of Theology. Seriously, a signal contribution of Dr. Honeycutt's presidency has been his unwavering affirmation of the role of women in ministry.
In my judgment, the most significant contribution, and in fact the legacy that Roy Honeycutt has given us here at Southern Seminary, is in the sequence of appointments he has made, and I'm speaking specifically about the appointment of the first female dean to serve at Southern Seminary, the appointment of the first female vice president to serve, the appointment of the first theology professor who was female, the appointment of the first female Old Testament professor, and the appointment of the first female church history professor. That is an astounding legacy for which we are indeed grateful and offer our support and our applause.
You have been singled out for this high and awesome responsibility during this significant period of history in the life of the Southern Baptist Convention. The task of President of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary has never been an easy assignment, nor will it ever be.
Allow me today to speak to you out of my heart about reconciliation, about the role to which I am committed as President of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary.
He has been extraordinarily effective in the annual meetings of the Southern Baptist Convention in speaking the word of Southern Seminary, in his convocation addresses, in his other mechanisms. He's always communicated very effectively Southern's image to this convention. The thing I would emphasize most is that he was a president of bold initiatives. That's different from the norm of convention leaders who tend to take very non-controversial stances. He was a challenge to the conservative control of the convention in the mid-'80s, and then he became a strong peacemaker.
I think Roy's greatest accomplishment might well be the fact that he has been a reconciler in the midst of a community of conflict. He has stood with integrity, he stood with honesty, and he's been able to be a minister of reconciliation in the midst of just unbelievable turmoil.
And we in this campaign are topping off a major effort which we have had underway for 2.5 or 3 years now to erect a building which will set forward the commitment of this institution both to the students, to alumni and others interested in continuing education, and to the community.
One of our trustees commented after our meeting on February 2nd when you took over, "I've never seen a rose blossom so fast."
It's ironic that when Roy Honeycutt was being considered for the presidency of Southern Seminary, one of the concerns expressed was his ability to raise funds. The magnificent campus center complex, which bears his and June's name, the addition to Cook Hall, and the substantial growth in the endowment which supports the institution all give ample testimony to his gifts in that area, and indeed to the fact that that has been one of his great strengths as president of Southern Seminary.
Well, one of the things I think that Dr. Honeycutt has done that's been particularly important to me and to so many others is his emphasis on the whole person and the whole family, both of our students and of faculty. And the Campus Center has been a place that we can be together as families, we can be with students, and I've found it very personally rewarding and also a good place just to take care of myself and for all the hard work we do in this place.
I could strive no more fervently in these 15 years than to look back at that time and see the dynamic maturation of a model Christian community where cherished qualities are realized. Simple qualities, qualities of understanding and of love and of kindness and of mutuality and honesty and personal integrity. Because until we can be this, we cannot be anything else.
And what Roy gave was a wholeness and consistency to the moral values that directed his life all the way through. I think the role of leadership requires that quality more than any other. It's nice to be warm-hearted, It's nice to be an outgoing personality. It's nice to have this ability or that ability. The absolutely essential one is wholeness, integrity of purpose, and word. I think this characteristic, above all, accounts for the trust that has been placed in Roy all the way through.
One of the reasons I believe you have been chosen in God's providence, our leader, is that you communicate Christ-likeness through the way you care for others.
He brought a time of, shall I use the word comfort, and of well-being. The Hebrew word is shalom, I think, even in the midst of great trouble to the seminary community.
When I think of Roy Honeycutt, I think of images like shepherd, friend, caregiver. Roy was there when our child was born. Roy and June sent a plant. Roy asked regularly about my family. I felt like he was a sustaining force throughout the crises we've gone through in these last 12 years.
Those who know you personally are continually impressed with the extraordinary qualities of Christian care, which we find in you and Mrs. Honeycutt.
Those of us who have known June in her role as First Lady recognize that you cannot have June Honeycutt without Southern Seminary. They do go together like a horse and carriage. This commitment to Southern Seminary is shown in her relationship to all with whom she comes in contact. Students, faculty, faculty wives, trustees, community leaders, all have felt June's presence. She is sensitive especially to the needs of students and their families. Their home is open each year to students as she begins in the fall with the ice cream supper and then having various students in the home throughout the year. And then at graduation, she's always there, greeting the students, greeting their parents, making them feel a part of Southern Seminary too. She is committed in her effort to support the seminary.
Roy's contributions to Southern Seminary have been extraordinary. He has increased the endowment in a remarkable way. He has assisted in the buildings that will go into the 21st century.
I think President Honeycutt's most important contribution is instilling confidence from a very diverse constituency. The faculty has had confidence in him, the administrative staff, trustees, convention leaders, and the folks in the churches. And that has resulted in building a team that has brought extraordinary progress to this institution in the last 11 years.
I think the greatest contribution Dr. Honeycutt has made is that he has blessed us and encouraged us to develop gifts, diverse though they may have been, and has made this place truly great as a consequence.
He has evidenced in his presidency the sense of what scholarship is about. He has encouraged it in his professors, and he has been able to show a collegiality with us in all of our scholarly enterprise that can only come from that of a deep scholar in his own soul and heart.
Keep us aware that the heritage of Southern Seminary is not something to sit on, but rather to stand on and to reach from. That in God's providence there are worlds yet to be conquered, dreams yet to be fulfilled, callings yet to be answered.
Roy, I wish for you that in your retirement time, that you could return to the kind of productive scholarship which you evinced at the beginning of the 70s and make the latter years of your life ones that again produce the riches of Old Testament scholarship for generations to come.
Roy, I think that my best wish for you in retirement is that you have respite from the pressures of dealing with trustees. But I also hope that you and June have an abundance of time to enjoy each other in travel and conversation.
We appreciate your involvement as First Lady June. You will always hold this place in our hearts as you are a creative, charming Southern woman. We pray God's blessings upon you and Roy as you retire and enter a new phase of your retirement at your new home on Lilac Lane. We thank you for all that you have done and meant to us as you have tied us together with a bow of love.
I'd hope, Roy, you have many opportunities of traveling, of teaching, but most especially that you get a chance to do a lot of fishing. That's what I hope.
Roy, I wish for you that the reruns of The Bible and Life will outstrip Pat Robertson, and the collected Bible outlines will become a runaway bestseller at Broadman. And June, I pray that you will know how deeply this community appreciates your gracious hospitality and your encouragement of so many of us.
And Roy, when you retire, I wish you plenty of time to enjoy your family, time to pursue some of your hobbies, and at least one 10-pound bass.
I hope you will have the joy and fulfillment that you deserve for having been deeply committed to a worthy cause. Not an easy one, but one that was worth everything you could give it.
Well, I think I would wish that the trees and vines which they have planted through the years as professor, dean, provost, president will continue to bear fruit in the future, and that they will not be cut down or left to wither away.
We are proud to have you and Southern Seminary continue to exert an influence for good to the uttermost ends of the earth. May God bless you and strengthen you.
You know what I think of, all the things you all have said, but I think of when the roll is called up yonder, we'll all be there.
Yeah.
Or here, or wherever it is. And I want to ask Larry, does he remember the phone call I made to him to tell him about Willis? Do you remember me calling you, Larry?
No.
I was at the hospital with Willis and Caroline, and well, Wanda was with me too. And when he died, and there are two people I call. One was Larry McSwain, and the other was Al Moeller. And I said to Larry, I remember this, Larry, I don't have good news. And that's when I told him about. And I want to tell you this about Willis. I think the other deans would know this. Willis worked there at the end without salary. And Roy let him spend money that was gone for his salary like he wanted to. So the deans got taken out to a lot of good restaurants and meals. Just want you all to know where that money went.
I've never heard those stories before, and I regret I don't remember the call. I remember his funeral.
He was working without
as well as Caroline's funeral.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that, getting that news. Roy and I were in the faculty lounge about 4:30, talking about the U of L game. We had tickets together, and we'd been the night or two nights before. And I went back to my office and had a counseling session with the student. And about 6 o'clock or 6:30, I got home. And Jody said, "Did you hear Roy Honeycutt died today?" And I said, "That can't be. I just talked to him. You know, that's a mistake." But it wasn't. It was just that quick. I think he stopped off for hamburgers or something and walked into the kitchen with Caroline and fell over of a heart attack. Do you remember, Larry?
Now you're talking, you said Roy.
I'm sorry, I meant Willis. I meant Willis
okay.
in all of this. Willis.
Willis was in the hospital when he died.
I know they rushed him to the hospital immediately.
Yeah.
He died within hours, apparently.
Right.
He had a tendency not to pay much attention to his doctor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I get harped at all the time. So in order not to be harped at, I try to pay attention.
I have this memory about Caroline. After Al became president and started imposing the social work school and firing the dean, a lot of the social work students were protesting outside the door of the president's office. And Caroline walked by and said, "Keep it up, girls, keep it up."
That sounds like her. She was feisty.
Yeah, they sure took. Of course, he was my PhD supervisor, and they sure took Linda and me under their wings and made us family, really.
You all may remember that she raised the money to bring, was it 10 Russians here one summer? And we had boys arranged a class on preaching. And there was one of the Russians who could speak English. So we circled them up, and John Lee, what's his name? That was pastor in Georgia. Anyway, we enlisted him to come teach.
Taylor.
Yeah. And so he would do his thing, and then the one Russian who could speak English was translated to Russian. And June raised the money. I don't know who she got it from. And this was her idea. And all of those Russians went back to Russia except one, the Podgaisky, and he married, his wife was a boy student, and he was a boy student also, and graduated. And on the night of graduation, we always let people do a testimony. And he, in part of his speech, he complimented Al Mohler for saving the seminary, but now they are CBF missionaries. So he didn't stay with his commitment that night. So,
well, good.
But June, that was one of the things I remember well, because June was so involved in bringing those people over here. And
Sue and I had an opportunity to have lunch with a small group in the seminary in Singapore. I went over there and spent a month in Hong Kong, and she came. We went to whatever I just said, Singapore. And I don't remember her name, but the lady that was a key faculty member and our hostess for a luncheon they had with us told me that the Honeycutts financed her coming to Southern Seminary. And that's the kind of people they were.
Yeah.
Larry, was that Lillian Lim?
Yes.
Familiar?
You got a good memory.
he gets paid to remember.
I think
she passed away.
Oh, she was a friend of Henry Barnett. I think I had lunch with her at Henley's one day.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a review and expositor issue all about Roy Honeycutt and his presidency way back when? I can't remember anything from it. But
I think so.
I will say this.
There was just a review and expositor issue for those of you who might not follow about Gerald Cowan. It came out this last time. It's really well done.
I missed what Daryl said. My hearing's not coming through, or my sound's not very. What did you? What were you saying, Daryl?
The dog just entered the room. I'm sorry. I said, wasn't there an issue of review and expositor about Roy Honeycutt?
Oh yeah,
And his ministry.
yeah, in
I think I have that stuff
2005.
back somewhere. 2005.
Yeah, 2005. Alan Culpepper was the leader of that happening, and it's an excellent article. Bill Leonard did a superb job, and of course Gerald, who's departed us. I thought one of the more interesting articles in that thing was what Duke McCall said about him.
And what was
he was so very complimentary about him being the most capable person available when he invited him to come and be the dean from Midwestern. And a few other things. I don't remember the real details, but I will add one other remembrance. I invited him to come to Roy to come to Shorter and be our commencement speaker. I think probably in about 94 or 5, somewhere in there. And like Duke became chancellor when Roy became president, Roy became chancellor when Al became president. He told me on that visit that he had been invited to the campus by Al Mohler twice in the years that he lived in Louisville. And he died having been on the campus twice.
I will say this about Andy's media services. He and I were there during the transition. And if it moved at Southern Seminary during that period, it was on video. I mean, this guy was there with his camera for everything. And if somebody in some future generation really wants to grasp what happened as far as faculty and student activity related to that, it's there. It's all on video, unless it's been destroyed.
And what we didn't videotape, we audio recorded. If it spoke on campus, it was recorded.
Having been over at Midwestern where Roy was, certainly after he was there, you all may not know this story, and it doesn't mean anything, but Midwestern is located on a farm, and with a lot of land. And they let us cut wood off of it if we had a fireplace. And the story is that when Roy was there, he and Ashcraft or somebody had been cutting wood, and they had put it in Roy's, I think he had a big Oldsmobile or something. And trying to haul that load of wood out, he tore up the transmission of his car. So I learned from that, never cut a very heavy load.
The video had some clips of Roy's inauguration. And one day before the inauguration, I went by Pat Patilla's office and asked him what he was doing. And he said he was writing the inauguration. I said, well, what are you writing? He said, well, he was writing Martha Layne Collins's remarks and Joe Stouffer's remarks and the rest of them. So I think Pat wrote it all. Is that correct, Pat Cole?
Well, that happened a year before I arrived on campus as a student, but I could hear some common themes coming through each speaker's presentation. And I just wondered to myself as I was watching it, I said, I think Patillo had his fingers
Yeah.
on all that, you know.
He told me he wrote it all. Well, you know, you invite the governor to speak, and it's appropriate that you provide some assistance with her remarks, I think.
Wasn't Martha Layne Collins a good Baptist?
Yeah, she was. Who later was president of a Catholic girls' school, wasn't she?
I don't want to just jump in, but because I haven't been here for the whole time, but I have not heard anybody talk about some of Roy and June's home experiences. Ann and I had the opportunity a good many times to stay at their house and to eat at their table. And Ann has written an article. Actually, it was published in 1990 when Roy was getting, and the other seminary presidents were getting so much problem. And it describes Ann's knowledge of growing up on that campus with the Fuller girls, for example, and on since that time. But at the Honeycutt's house, to have breakfast with them at their table, she declared was certainly something very real when others were accusing them of all kinds of hypocrisy. But if you've ever been there, every breakfast was about the same. Roy would begin by reading scripture, and you would, whatever the scripture was for today. And then June would name the missionaries that were on the missionary prayer list. And then they had other concerns. And then whoever happened to be there, that little group held hands while Roy offered the prayer. It was a beautiful spiritual experience every time we had it. And I think to know something of the character of those people and how they conducted their daily lives, if you were at their house as overnight guest, you were a part of the breakfast. And it was a wonderful memory that I have of Roy and June Honeycutt.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
My memory of breakfast is Roy invited Ken, pastor at Walnut Creek. Who am I talking about?
Ken Chafin.
Huh?
Ken Chafin?
Ken Chafin. After the Glorietta statement and Roy had collapsed on that one, he invited Chafin and me to breakfast to try to bind up the wounds, because we had worked so hard on the 85 convention and we lost, and Roy felt bad, but he didn't apologize, but he did thank us for what we had tried to do. And I always appreciated him for that. One last story. In pastoral care, who was the young woman who I think did a PhD? She lived on a farm up in southern Indiana.
Diane Bertolino Green. She was the first.
What was her name?
Diane Bertolino Green.
Yes, yes.
And they had a pond up there that we'd go fishing. Yes.
Yeah. Well, anytime Roy would get depressed, June would call me up and say, "Can you take Roy fishing?" So we would make a trip to her pond, and we took a 5-gallon bucket one time and came home with 49 fish. And he had a fish fry. So that was one of his relief outfit. And he told me a lot of stories, some of which I can't repeat.
Well, I have a fishing story.
I'm not sure I remember them that well.
Larry, I have a fishing story about Roy.
He fired one of the faculty members. He fired at Midwestern for having an affair with a student or somebody there. And he went into great detail how he got the guy to confess that he was indeed guilty before he fired him. And I won't go into those details.
Oh,
but
we
that's
won't
one of the stories I remember.
Well, I have a fishing story about Roy. Some of you may remember that a group of us would go down to Kentucky Lake and stay on a houseboat and fish every year. Alan Culpepper and Gerald Callan and I were there many, many times. But Roy came 3 or 4 different years. Bob Johnson came often. And we had a new professor, Carrie Newman, Carrie did not have a tenure yet. And Carrie had a little bit of an eye problem. But we were all sitting around after supper the first night, and Roy pulls out this very expensive $300 fly rod and tells a story about how his son had bought it for him and how much it meant to him. And we were all oohing and ahhing, and he was going to fish the next morning. He apparently left it sitting near the doorway or something. Anyway, Carrie stepped on it the next morning and broke it before Roy could fish. And popped that fly rod right into pieces, and Carrie came unglued. Oh my! I mean, he was so upset. He didn't know whether to tell Roy. And so I don't know. Alan or somebody brought Roy in and told him. And Roy's response was, "Don't think a bit about it. Those fly rods are insured. I will get another one, and I will fish with it another time. Don't let it bother you." But I was in the boat with Carrie and Alan Culpepper later, and Culpepper said, "Don't believe a word of that. Your tenure is gone." We rode him the whole trip. But Roy was just so gracious and forgiving and accepting. And I know it had to break his heart for it. He never got to fish with it once.
Well, he was still dean when I left, and so I didn't get the presidential memories that some of you have. But I know when President Carter came to speak at the Southern Baptist Convention one year, David Wilkinson was with him, and it was when the troubles were at their worst, I guess. And Jimmy Carter asked David Wilkinson, "How is Roy doing? How's he faring under all the pressure that he's under right now?" And David assured him that he was doing fine. And President Carter said, "Well, could you get him on the phone? I'd like to talk to him." So David called Roy, got him on the phone, and this part's not about Roy, but it was just funny. David said, when Roy answered, President Carter said, "Roy, this is Jimmy Carter. Remember me?"
Another quick story about the fishing trip with Roy Honeycutt. Literally, he gave me the shirt off his back. We were fishing, and somebody had given him a Atlanta Olympics T-shirt, and he wore it fishing, and I commented about how special that was, and that I had one from the Korean Olympics from being over there, and he came back home, had the shirt laundried, and gave it to me. I still have it hanging up there, and every now and then I will wear it just to remember Roy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter spoke at graduation one time.
Yeah,
he did.
It was Roy's last graduation, wasn't it? And we had a dinner. We had a lunch. I was at the lunch. And do you remember somebody dropping their camera out of the balcony and the Secret Service comes into action?
I don't remember that. What I remember, it was downtown. The luncheon we had it in some auditorium downtown.
Right.
And President Carter was walking up and down the halls visiting with the waiters and waitresses and the maintenance people. He wasn't talking to the seminary people. He was talking to his voters.
I do remember that when the degrees were being awarded, after people received their degree, he stood there and shook hands with every graduate as they came across the stage after they got their diploma.
Including his pastor.
And
Dan Ariel.
Dan Ariel, yes.
Yep.
And that's how he happened to come, because Dan was graduating. But he agreed to only come if we could arrange transportation, so he didn't have to go through the Atlanta airport. And so a friend of Southern donated his plane and sent his pilot down to pick him up and take him back.
You all might be interested. Our associate pastor of 1 year, Ashley Guthis, she's a graduate of McAfee. She is the new pastor at Maranatha in Plains, beginning June the 1st. So it'll be interesting to see how she does down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Plains
female pastor
several times for services, and it's interesting. Carter never signed autographs at church, but he would pose for pictures. And so when church was over, he would stand outside for as long as people would come by, and he and his wife would stand there. And I've got several pictures that were made when I was there with President Carter. The last time I was there, I sat on the front row, and the Sunday school class was in the sanctuary, and Carter stood right in front of me. I had to pull my feet back so he wouldn't step on them. So it was a remarkable experience to be there. That was about 10 years ago, I guess, but good memories. I went down with the Historical Commission. They asked me to go and videotape an interview with him about his work teaching Sunday school over the years. And so we did a sit-down interview at the Carter Center in Atlanta, and then sat in his Sunday school class there in Plains. And it was an interesting experience. Dan Ariel talked about how Carter took part in the duties around the church, like mowing the grass. And Carter would come and cut the grass like everybody else. He also remarked that Jimmy Carter didn't have a driver's license because they didn't let him drive, because he always had Secret Service protection, so he had no driver's license. It's kind of odd.
Well, Larry, did you have any memory of when you and Roy were planning the conventions? You mentioned that earlier, and I think you were probably closer to him during than any of us.
Who are you talking to?
To you, Larry. I was wondering if you had any memories of that. Someone told me that you and he were planning one of the conventions, and it was when Al was working in his office and was actually spying on the two of you. And
well, I haven't heard that part of it, but Roy, the main thing, he knew what I was doing, and I was flying down to Louisiana to meet with what we thought was our hotshot leader in that part of the country, and it didn't work out very well. But he called me up one day and said, I want you to get a ticket and fly to Dallas. And I went out there, and y'all have to forgive me. I lost my capacity on names, but who's the guy that all the moderates get their money from? The Cisco billionaire.
John Ball.
Huh?
John Ball.
Yeah.
Daughter Babs.
Yeah, I met with
Granddaughter.
Baugh and the guy that was head of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention at that time. And Mr. Baugh basically said, if you need money, you call me and you'll have a check immediately. And he paid a lot of the bills of some things that we had to spend money on, like lodging for students, for instance, and some publicity and things like that. But that's one of the more specific things. But Roy knew everything I was doing, and so did Duke. When 81 came around, I had gotten connected to the Gatlinburg crew, and I went to his office and told him what I was doing, that I was going to be meeting with them and he should be aware of it and so forth. And he said, well, you're going to need some money. He gave me $5,000 to take to the convention and use to publish announcements and all of that sort of stuff for the Gatlinburg gang group. And I always appreciated him for that. And Buddy and I in particular were very involved in the effort to get him elected to the presidency at New Orleans. Of course, he got beat, but we made a fighting, staunchy men. I mean, we had lodging set up for people. We had telephone networks going. We did everything. But it didn't win. We lost every one of them. But I'd rather try and lose than not try at all.
Hear, hear.
Thank you for all you did, Larry, to give us as much freedom as we had for as long as we had it.
Well, I don't, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book I wrote, and I've said about all that I need to say, but
Well, I certainly enjoyed reading it.
I
Thank you
felt
for writing.
I felt fully encouraged by my colleagues, and I tried to be as quiet about most of it as I could. Some of it you can't be.
Larry, you mentioned New Orleans. I would imagine, I've been here long enough to know who all is present, but do you remember that year that we held the convention there, and the alumni meeting was the largest one seminary ever had. Pat Patillo had done a tremendous job in promoting that thing, and I was the national president that year, and we had prepared a resolution for Roy to honor him because he was being abused in a lot of ways. And when we got to our meeting that day, we left the convention hall and came, but at the convention hall, he was especially abused, but he came into 1,850 or so seminary graduates and their families who were ready to move, among other things, present this resolution. And it was a very beautifully written one. I'm not sure who wrote it. But anyway, sitting in the front of that meeting, the stage, were the 5 or 6 new trustees that had just been elected that were not the seminary's nominees at all. You're nodding your heads. You remember that event.
Yeah.
But do you recall that when the resolution was read, as soon as it was finished, everybody in that hall stood to their feet and cheered Roy. There was an ovation that I won't ever forget, except those newly elected trustees sat right in front of me. They had their hands folded and a frown on their face. Does anybody beside me remember that?
Now, there were two New Orleans meetings in that decade. Are you talking about the one where Duke was the candidate or the one where Dan Vestal was the
Larry, I
candidate.
think that was about 1992 or 3 was when
Okay,
this was.
that would have been when Duke
That was
was
the Duke.
nominated,
When I
and
was
they put the rumor out that he was an alcoholic.
But it
Supposedly
was,
drank some beer in China or something.
I would say that in many ways, although Roy had been beaten badly at the convention hall, the support of his alumni was so overwhelming. I think it took away a lot of the pain.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful moment for those of us who had participated in taking care of the resolution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I remember.
Yeah.
I think that was the year that I made the move to remove a trustee of Southern Seminary.
Lamar, I didn't know you were present. I hadn't seen you so far because I got here late.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell all that story, but anyway, I'm just finding out who else is online today.
Right. Yeah, I was pastor at Hill City Baptist Church in Gordon County, and I introduced a motion on the floor to remove one of the trustees that had the vendetta against Roy.
Yeah. Well, we never had another meeting like that again. We tried one at the, Dallas airport. I mean, that wasn't where we met, CBF group, and tried to have, we never got it again. I went back to one more in Atlanta, and it was, that was just a great meeting in many ways, at a very bad time and a time a good meeting was needed.
It was.
Roy had been a good friend. Actually, some of y'all know that I was on the search committee that brought him there. And he did not disappoint. He did not disappoint. So, and I don't know is June still around since I missed the early part?
Mm-hmm.
June, are you there? She's not still there. Okay. Well, she was a lovely associate. I have a beautiful letter she wrote my Ann back along about, in the middle 90s, I guess, near the end. But she was an asset to Roy. And I think when we talk about him, and we need to now and then mention something about June, because she was indeed a terrific supporter of the seminary. She bugged me. Larry McSwain, do you remember any of this? Do you all recall the old days when we had seminary Sundays? And I would invite various people from the seminary on that day. And June had been on my back for about 2 years. She said, Floyd, you have a lot of car dealers in your church, and you need to give us a new van for the seminary. Every time she saw me, she raised that. And I hadn't done much about it, but finally we decided to do something. And Larry might have been there that day. Anyway, I made Roy aware of what was going to happen. But then they came down, and Roy was our speaker that day. But when I introduced him, I didn't mention her at all. And when it was over, the service was over, and we aren't leaving, but Roy's finished and so on. I said, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that the president's wife is here. She's sitting there on the second row. June, would you come up on the platform with me? Well, she somewhat hesitantly did that, and she's standing at the lectern. Remember, we're not only president, we're televised pretty widely at that time. And I said to her something not all that nice, I think. And then I said, June, you have been on my back for a couple of years. Would you mind telling this congregation why? Of course, the congregation knew what was going on too. So she kind of hung her head and said, I wanted you to give the seminary a new van. I said, well, June, I want you to know I'm tired of that. My church is tired of hearing about it, and we don't want to hear it anymore. And June, here are the keys to your new van. just parked out in front of the church. And she kind of screamed, as you know June would, and ran down the steps and out the aisle, and the deacons had moved the van to right in front. He came back to Louisville. Roy knew about it. He bought a one-way ticket to Georgia when they were coming down, but June didn't know that. But he was sitting on the stage up there on the platform, trying his best to keep from laughing out loud at what was going on with June when I was insulting her publicly. But everybody in the congregation knew it. It was a good day, but June got the van that she wanted. Some of y'all know about that, Bright. That was in
yes, I made a picture.
Mid-50s, 60s. Anyway, incidentally, we did not get it from one of our car dealers. We got it from a Methodist layman who owned the Buick GMC agency, and it was a GMC van. It was had a fancy paint job, and seminary made use of it, I guess, for a long time. I think I saw it once more after that.
We had a van ministry, and every weekend they would drive to Michigan.
Yeah.
That was the main use for it.
You know about it then, Andy.
Yes, when they got back
David
to
Sapp found his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was an earlier edition of the minibus to Michigan program. When I met Linda going up there every weekend.
All I know was that June really was on my back about it. But gosh, she was so sweet and just a real asset to the seminary. And June got the van. I mean, if she hadn't bugged me, your seminary never would have gotten it.
He raised a lot of the money for the
yes, you did.
Honeycutt Center.
Larry, did you happen to be there that day, or was that after your time or before your time?
No, that was before I.
That was before you were the president locally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Y'all, I've got to pull out. It's been a fun conversation.
Same here. Thank you so much, Andy, for all you've done. And you'll tell us how to access this?
I'll send you a link to the videos that I showed and to this compiled one as well. But I'll post the other two on YouTube so you can share them individually without sharing the whole conversation too, if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.